conversation with you has been both friendly and to a degree short but deep as well. I don't think we've ever just had a casual chat. Even in the few minutes we've spoken here and there, there's gravitas to the conversation, and I owe that to you. You're very easy to speak with. I've listened to you for years. I've watched you on TV for years. And I know that traffic laws are your thing, so I thought I'd bring my false metro map notepad with me, the metro that was never built. There's a lot to talk about, and I'll try to take it into a more unusual route because you've shared your opinion on many things, from your Ministry of Interior days to your work in civil society, to your ongoing work in decentralization. But I'll start off on an unusual note. Things are very difficult, and it feels like every time we speak, more recent years, things get worse. And I know that this is not just us. It's a very crippling and painful time to be in this country. And I'm curious, for someone like you, who has many reasons to perhaps be a bit let down, you continue to offer optimism on your terms. And I think the simple fact that you're still engaged in both civil society and in politics means that you're not giving up. And I think that's the easier road to take, and you're not taking it.
So far.
So far. Well said. Let's start here. Just your emotions, personal, public, your relationship to this country right now on your terms. How is it for you to see this country where it is and still try to navigate this system?
Well, let me first tell you how much I'm pleased to have you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. And every time we speak, it's always a deep conversation, and it's always, yes, short, but short is good sometimes.
Yeah.
You may speak for hours and say nothing at all, And this is, many would do that.
Hopefully we say something tonight then.
We'll see.
We'll keep it short.
We'll see.
That was a great episode.
We'll keep it short. So, yes, the country, it's a love-hate relationship, I guess, for all Lebanese people with their country. I'm one of those. I'm no exception. I navigate in troubled waters, so to speak. We don't know really how things would evolve, but we always keep hope. It doesn't mean that it's very smart. Sometimes hope is not rational. Hope is sometimes a way of some sort of resistance to the events every time when you cannot really change them.
Yeah.
Or change the course of events. So I'm not an optimistic person blindly, but I think that I made my mind to stay at least engaged, if not optimistic. Engaged because, when you're 50, it's different. You cannot really restart everything at 50. But at the same time, I think that we have a big opportunity, even within a crisis, the opportunity to do something. And at least at the end of the day, when your kids would ask you, what did you do? At least you will have an answer. You would tell them, well, I tried to do something. Maybe I failed. I'm not sure about it. But take when I served in the interior, there were some failures, definitely, but there were some hope in concrete, meaning there were things that happened actually. Some breakthrough occurred, and I'm proud of it because I could have said, well, it's complicated. I don't want to go there. It was a challenge, definitely, coming not from within the political class, traditional political class, not from a political party, being an independent person is not easy in politics, especially in Lebanon. And I do believe that we need new groups. We don't need independent people, individuals. We need independent groups, new political parties who could maybe make it to the parliament or to the government and try to do something.
So this shows you just where the conversation is going to go, because in one answer you offered so much, and there's a lot to unpack there, which I really appreciate. And just by referencing your age, I hope I got it right. You're exactly 51?
Yes, 1970.
1970. So that means you were either 37 or 38 when you entered Ministry of Interior.
Yeah, true.
Younger than me. I'm 40. So I'm trying to imagine myself serving as Minister of Interior. I cannot expect anyone to do more than the circumstances allow them. And I think the circumstances have been very complicated for a long time in this country.
Since 1920.
Since 1920. But we'll go into those years because they're important, obviously.
Yes.
It would be strange to avoid them. But I want to go back a bit further because I don't think enough is known about where your curiosity or even your enthusiasm for civic duty comes from. I know the basics. I know that you studied law, and you're obviously a product of the Civil War by your age, and by that you graduate in the early 1990s from Saint Joseph.
And they do, yeah.
So just after the Civil War ends, you're entering a profession, and this is following a 15-year civil war, and I think I'm going to assume you have no memories of life before the war, or they may be fleeting at best.
No.
You've witnessed, I think, a roller coaster ride from post-war reconstruction, Syrian occupation, political stagnation, all that came in the early 2000s, 2005, and then your entry into the limelight in 2008. I can't imagine what it's like to be in your shoes, to see Lebanon change so much. And in those years, you're helping establish something like LADE.
Yes, I was one of the founders.
You're one of the founders, and I think...
And LTA, the Lebanese Transparency
Right.
Association.
Was it that you were the Secretary General of that group
LADE,
for
yeah.
LADE? Yeah, so by 2004 or so,
Yeah.
around then. So you're invested before you enter politics, and you're heavily involved in civil society.
But that's politics as well.
So that you're exactly, and that's really my question here.
In a way, another way of doing politics.
Well, okay, so let me ask you in a more constructive way, because you're going exactly where I'm going, and I want to really understand something. You've done work on decentralization, on electoral reform. You've helped commission the Boutros Commission, or you worked in the Boutros Commission.
Yes.
You are civil society. You're also, in my opinion, among the least likely ministers of interior in Lebanon's history. And I would take it a step further. I think someone like yourself, or even Rayal Hassan, these are not the kind of people that you imagine entering that position. She's from the finance and economics world, you're from civil society, but in a way, it's almost that you've seen two sides of the story. You've seen attempts at reform, and you've been inside the system itself. So at this stage, when you look back, is the onus on civil society to keep pushing through? Or is the onus at this point not in civil society's court, but anyone that enters the halls of power, that it's their obligation to see problems and see them maybe clearer than before? And I don't want to maybe touch on too sensitive issues right now, but what I'm getting at is, it seems like civil society is exactly where it was, regardless. And you would think at this point, maybe it's not their fault. Maybe it's circumstances that are beyond their control. So whatever you can take from that, because you've had an illustrious career on both ends of the spectrum.
You know,
Cut.
When you go back to the early years of university, and when you start understanding how it works in Lebanon, I don't pretend that I really understand how it works. Nobody does. It's so complicated that we don't really know if it works anyway. And I do believe that the system is not working. It's not functioning. And this is one of the main issues we're facing. Since many decades, it's not new. It's not after the revolution. It's way before. When you enter, when you're part of the system, you're part of it in a way, but you're not one of those who are in the system. So you deal with the system if you're serving as minister, but it doesn't mean, nevertheless, that you're part of it. So I like very much to do the distinction between serving as a minister, serving the country, serving the citizens, and being part of the system. I do pretend that I've never been part of the system. Why? Because I'm coming from elsewhere. Because I'm coming from the civil society culture. But civil society is not political, meaning civil society would do campaigns, would maybe advocate for electoral reform. This is political,
right,
but it's not politics in the way that we know. So coming from a reformist, so to speak, circle, ending up part of what the system does is not easy. And many times I was uncomfortable, to be very honest, between what I think and how I think and the background I'm coming from and what I was dealing with. So you're trying to introduce reforms and you have a huge resistance from the traditional political class, which works based on interests. And if you're very naive, you would be very frustrated and angry. And if you're very smart, you'd be frustrated and angry as well. So
you're frustrated and angry.
Anyway, your frustration is key here.
Yeah.
How to deal with it? Sometimes you say to yourself, "Well, I wish I was not there.
But you know what?
I wish I didn't know how ugly it is." But at the same time, you have to do your job, and I can say proudly that I didn't have to do any concession on principles. So you navigate, yes, you navigate between, what needs to be done, but without necessarily transforming yourself into someone else.
But I'd like to dissect two examples, and they're actually, I think, appropriately from two chapters of your career. And I hope I'm not speaking on your behalf here, but that's the way I understand it. You're working very hard with the Boutros Commission.
Yes.
And this is the Fouad Boutros. This is the former foreign minister Fouad Boutros. I think it's 2005? Yes, 2005. So this is the Fouad Senora government that emerges after the 2005 elections.
The Fouad Senora government appointed this blue ribbon commission. With many,
it's just you, it's
experts, Paul Salem, Nawaf Salam.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm mentioning Paul Salem and Nawaf Salam and many others who were great in the commission, who did a lot. But I'm mentioning my two friends, Nawaf and Paul, because the three of us were founders of LADE. So this is where we're coming from, and we imported, if you wish, all the ideas into the commission.
So that's the best introduction to what I'm hoping I ask it in a way that makes sense. That's years and years of your own life spent on electoral reform. The 2000 electoral law, it's in a way, it's an attempt at revising that law and improving it, rethinking electoral laws in this country, which is in itself is a painstaking adventure, but you go down that road. You're involved with Transparency International. If I'm not mistaken, it's LCPS at some point as
Yes,
well, where
as well.
Paul Salem is involved too. So there's a lot of time and energy spent.
Yes. At the time when I was also working as a lawyer
Your
to make
personal
ends
career-
meet. I mean,
100%.
this
So,
was totally pro bono thing, and
this is civic duty, and this is a
Yes.
civil society member who's taken.
much needed, and I should have done it anyway.
But here's the caveat in my mind. All of that work dies with the July 2006 war. Even if it's picked up, even if the skeleton remains, but that's something beyond your control.
Yes.
The July 2006 war is not in your hands and Paul Salem's hands.
But it's not only about the war.
Okay, so let's focus in a bit. Say as much as you'd like. Would you argue that the reasons it didn't carry on has to do with other issues as opposed to the July war?
Definitely.
So the July war is just adding to the problem rather than...
It's adding to the problem. It's a reason. It's a maybe major event that made things more difficult than they were.
Yeah.
But no, I think that the political class didn't like much the reforms that were proposed because somehow you're asking many of them, I wouldn't like to generalize, but many of them, you're asking them to go home or to do things differently. Take, for instance, the pre-printed ballot.
Yeah.
In 2008, it was a huge thing to introduce the pre-printed ballots. I remember I went to the parliament the day of the discussion of the law with 128 specimen printed with the photos and names, and MPs were happy to see it. I mean, they were maybe amused to see that, well, it's nice. And it was the morning session, and we were supposed to resume in the afternoon. I went back to the office. 2 members of parliament, each belonging to a different political group, came to see me unannounced to tell me you should withdraw this proposal.
Let me interrupt you politely, because I want to interject at this time frame. The reason I'm focusing on 2006, as opposed to when you're already assuming control of the Ministry of Interior, there's that window where the governments have changed, circumstances have changed. The July 2006 war, in itself, indirectly perhaps, but the consequence is that the government formed that commissions, the Boutros Commission, is deemed illegitimate by one team.
No, not necessarily. You're skipping Doha Agreement.
That's my point. So that 2006 to 2008, the commission doesn't go further. The Doha Agreement creates new circumstances.
Of course.
Right. So
And new understandings between or among political groups.
exactly. So that's my question though. Is it someone like you has to navigate those waters, but let's remove something like that burden on your shoulders. Do you still think that the electoral law, the work you were doing, do you still think it would have been shelved regardless, despite those bigger circumstances?
Maybe not, but at the end, when members of parliament would have to vote, I'm not sure that they would have voted differently, because it's cultural in their mind. Most of them wouldn't really go, and the fact is that since 2005, the reforms that were introduced or accepted or adopted were minor compared to what we proposed in the Boutros Commission. Take, for instance, the independent commission.
Yeah.
We ended up with a supervisory commission or committee without much prerogatives. So if you compare what was proposed in 2005, bearing in mind that what was proposed then was already part of the literature of LADE and company, and the bigger picture of the civil society advocacy, 2017 or even 2008 was nothing compared to the proposed amendments and reforms.
So all of these things are contributing to the difficulties people like you are experiencing, I'm assuming. It's not just that
I don't take it personal.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't take it personal. I look at the bigger picture,
Right.
and I believe that who are losing the opportunity of having something different? Smaller groups, political minorities, because every time we say minority, we think confessional, sectarian. No, we have political minorities, we have gender issues, we have the young generation unable to make it to the parliament or to anywhere else because of the system. So yes, we have a big issue related to the system, but at the same time we have issues on smaller things. But let us agree that the electoral law is not minor. It's
No,
not,
of course.
it's not a
Yeah.
minor thing.
No, actually,
It's the basis.
structural. Yeah, of course.
You know, that's why I think that the reform here is more difficult, but it will happen. I think it's a matter of time.
So let's
Take the pre-printed ballots, for instance. It didn't happen in 2008, but they had to do it in 2017.
Right. So it's delayed, but to a
It's delayed, but it will happen.
it will. So I'm glad you.
I'm positive about this.
I'm also glad that you, in a way, in a sense, it's correcting maybe lexicon. The way you defined yourself as a Minister of Interior, I like that. You're still an independent voice, an independent mind, and you're coming from civil society. You're not a career politician. So I'm glad that you said this earlier.
And I'm back to the civil society.
And you're back.
But mind you, when I was in office, I said I'm not civil society anymore.
But
You
that's-
cannot be Minister of Interior
Sure.
and pretend being civil society. This is contradictory.
But you're also, I mean, this is a subjective opinion, and I know it's shared. You're probably the most appealing Minister of Interior Lebanon has had in recent history, if not in history. You were very on the ground. I mean, this is going back years now, but I remember seeing you leaving your entourage, and you were doing things that were unusual and in a positive way. You were even explaining sometimes to reckless drivers the need to drive safely.
But without a camera.
Without it?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
I mean, this is important.
Yeah.
Because it was
yeah.
not about showing off
Sure,
what you're
but-
doing. Sometimes you need to do it.
Sure.
Show off.
And it would leak on the news.
But the 47
later.
times when I went at midnight,
Yeah.
and in order to be next to the police, next to
Yeah.
the internal security forces,
On camera or off camera, it was very appealing to a public that was not used to someone from civil society in a very important ministry. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the tone you entered with and the tone you stayed in. And you served in 2 governments. But the reason I wanted to bring up the first example of someone like you and others in your shoes trying to navigate electoral reform, the other example in my mind, and you've said a lot on it, we don't have to go that far into it. You resign. But you don't resign for reasons that have to do with your own individual choices. You're resigning because, in a way, anyone in your shoes at that point, if they're going to stick their head up further, they're going to be in the crossfire. And I think you resigned at that time. It was a delicate time, and a lot has been said already about the ISF and Shab and Nahas and your role in the middle. But that's my point, really, which is even when you're in office, there's not much more you can do because of the circumstance. Now, is that paradigm a fair way of looking at somebody in civil society and someone serving the state? That there's a constraint which doesn't let much happen, even when there are small changes happening slowly. But we're looking at a career that is now over 3 decades. So, I don't want to sound negative or even, I don't want to make it sound like effort has gone wasted. On the contrary.
No.
I don't think that's the case.
No.
But just that there's a built-in, almost like a wall that anyone will crash into.
Lessons learned, because one should learn some lessons here. One is it's very difficult to be independent when the polarization is such that you cannot really navigate anymore. So for many, my resignation was perceived wrongly, I believe, as a weakness. Many would have liked me to be more aggressive or refuse to resign, keep doing things. For me, it's I understand their way of seeing things, but they do not know the whole picture. And at the time, I did the utmost I could do.
Yeah.
Okay, but at the time, I was an independent minister with two parties fighting at each other's, and you're in the middle, and you're becoming, in a way, a false witness, sitting there and unable to do anything. So I tried to do what I had to do as Minister of Interior, but when I felt that this is mission impossible, I decided to walk out because I didn't want to stay there without being able to do what any Minister of Interior should have done. You see? So I understand people who do not know the details, and one day will come, not yet, when I would be able to share more details.
I've heard you say this.
I'm not there yet.
I've heard you say it a few times, so I'm glad you're going to do it on my podcast.
Yes, I
not now, later.
Yeah, later. It's a promise.
I appreciate it. Is it a promise?
But because some things cannot, I mean, some details which are important, but not yet. The fact is that when I resigned, it was a strong stand in my reading. It was a strong stand saying, well, you know what? You want to do things as ugly as you're doing them. I'm not part of it. And I refuse to be part of your polarization. I would say sometimes stupid polarization, because it was not about principles and people's rights. It was about interests. And I didn't want to be part of that. Right. So when I resigned, I decided to be out of the system. In general, people would like very much to stay in the system. And when, maybe this is the first time I'm saying this, when in the third, I was in two cabinets. Right. When I resigned, there was some talks about the Ministry of Justice. And my answer was no, because I declined politely. Maybe they were not serious enough to offer me this, but I didn't want to give the impression at all that I'm trying to find somewhere to sit, and remain in what we call sulta, or to be part of the system. So I walked out.
Allow me to try to portray it as somebody who's watching, and I mean the way I would see it is geopolitics stops or delays the good work being done in 2005 to 2006. The July War makes it very difficult to keep going at the momentum you're moving. Geopolitics brings you into power. In May 2008, this is not a Lebanese-only affair. And I think you would agree with me, at least in terms of the framing, that Doha agreement in itself explains the geopolitical story there. It also brings in Michel Sleiman as president, and you are, in a way, one of his choices, if not his priority, to put you in the Ministry of Interior. My own father is in the 2008 to 2009 government as well. He was Minister of Finance. And there's a moment I remember, I don't know if this is going to be familiar to you. You were on TV, I believe it was Jadid, and the host was being a bit hard, trying to find out what you would say regarding corruption. And they kept saying, is there corruption in this location? You said, yes.
Yes.
Is there corruption in that location? Yes. Is there corruption in every location? Yes. You were being blunt about deepening, worsening corruption. And the geopolitical story may tie in to the reasons why you're forced to resign. They may not be only petty Lebanese issues. I think there's a common thread here. Now, let me posit a question. Can you be independent in a country where geopolitics determines the bigger story at play?
Very tough. It's very difficult to be independent. No, you can keep your own principles, stay independent. Nobody would, impose anything on you if you don't wish to follow.
Yeah.
But the efficiency of what you undertake, of the tasks that you do, the efficiency is at stake. So you may end up not being able to do and to perform as you wish. I remember, to give an example, in a parliamentary session, I would go with all my files, all my papers, and at some point the speaker tells me, what, this is the closet you're bringing with you? I said yes, because that's how I protect myself. Why? Because other ministers who are part of political groups, who have members of parliament, they would defend them if any of the present members of parliament attacks or says anything, I didn't have this luxury. And I had to protect myself by doing things by the book and by avoiding anything that could harm this profile of being independent.
Right. Now, this is the only chance I'll have, I think, to ask you what is probably going to be the most delicate issue. Because I want to know your opinion on something that is, for me, it's hard to see anyone with good intentions able to confront what is, I think, over time shown itself to be one of the most important contributing factors to Lebanon's political paralysis. I think it would be naive to assume at this point that ignoring the geopolitical component, and I'm honing in now on Hezbollah, that there's much that can be done so long as that issue is left as it is. And I will speculate here, and this is where I'd like your opinion, that this is a common thread throughout successive governments, whether it's March 14, whether it's national unity, Doha 2008, whether it's the second March 14 government, and 2009 you're one of those ministers in that government, albeit not March 14, but you're one of the Michel Sleiman ministers. 2018 elections, the same thing, and quite possibly in May. Is that something that comes to you as a given at this point, that this is a problem that has to be mitigated if someone in your shoes or anyone in your shoes wants to see a reformed, functioning state?
I have to be very honest about this. This is something that we know for a fact for decades. We've been dealing with this fact since many years. I would ask all those who formed the cabinets and the governments repeatedly, why did they do what they did? And it's up to them to answer, because as Minister of Interior, I think that I managed to do things properly without any concession whatsoever. So for me, it was not the issue.
Right.
It is an issue for the country. It is an issue to the extent that the national dialogue has repeatedly been trying to put it on the agenda, Babda Declaration, So it's that big. But as far as I was concerned, I had to deal with all political groups in order to prepare the elections of 2009 and the elections of 2010.
Right.
So I was dealing with any political group the same way in order to be really independent, and I wouldn't say neutral, but keeping the same distance with everybody.
So let me.
And it's not me who's saying this.
Yeah.
It's the monitoring groups in 2009, in all the reports, they all said, well, the Minister of Interior was not partisan for this party or against. So the bigger thing, yes, I do believe that we need to address it, that we cannot keep, postponing this. And it's a Lebanese matter, yes, geopolitical, but it's at the start, it's a Lebanese thing. We Lebanese should talk together. We should try to find solution, because it's not only about Vienna discussions or negotiations. It's not only about what's happening in Baghdad or Iraq. Yeah. It's also Lebanese. So there are two dimensions in this issue.
I'll throw it back to you, and you tell me if even the question itself is unfair. So I'll do this as honestly as I can. It should be taken as a given that 2009 is the most successful Lebanese election done.
In terms of management.
In terms of management,
I'm personally not satisfied with the money that was spent in 2005, 9, before 18. Why? Because the banking secrecy is still there. And if you go back to the parliament's minutes of meetings in 2008, you will see that I was calling for no banking secrecy on all candidates' banking accounts.
Even with
the proposal was barely heard.
But even with that huge problem, you still managed to do something which I think has not been done since, a parliamentary election on one day.
Yes, that was a challenge.
And you succeeded.
A big challenge, and I was afraid. I have to confess. But I think one MP a week before the elections, he went on TV and said the Minister of Interior is crazy. No, he said, literally, the Minister of Interior is crazy. He will never be able to organize elections in one day. And we made it. It was not the minister. It was the team. It was those who were involved in the process.
But you inspired, I think, a lot of citizens, and this is, I think, across the aisle, to a functional institution, earlier known for more intelligence work that was not necessarily good for citizens. Instead, I think you gave it a cleaner, brighter image, and you shined. There's an award, I saw it recently online when I was trying to do my research diligently, the UN Public Administration Award or something along the lines of the
UN Public Service Award.
Public Service
Award.
First
prize, yes.
So this
was in 2010.
Right, this is not a Lebanese award given to you. This is an international body, the highest international body, acknowledging you did something incredible. You also did something...
No, I'm sorry. I did my job. Really.
I'm glad you're saying it this way because you did your job.
I did my job, only.
Then you're among the few...
But in Lebanon, when you do your job, people are so surprised sometimes that they would give you awards.
Well, then we can take the award back. Yes. No, but I was here then, and I recall that the smoothness was both unusual and welcomed. You also made it possible, and it became official policy, for somebody like Kamel Salibi, prominent Lebanese historian who I used to know. I used to live in one of his old music schools turned student pensions in Hamra. So I got to meet him. And the first encounter I had with Kamel Salibi was his birth certificate framed with his sect dashed out.
Yes.
So you made it possible to remove religious identity on your ikhraj aid.
On your registers.
On your registry,
On your registry, but it was not only me. Again,
of course,
it was the Constitution that allows it. A law of 1933, a work that was done by many, such as Talal Husseini. So I was only trying to really translate all the civil society demands and
Of course.
and call for reforms. Wherever I could, I really used this pen in order to make it happen. That's all. So I was telling them, please use me in order to introduce the reforms that we've been calling for many years.
Important reform measures that you were able to deliver were delivered. And also, I remember this, it became easier to register yourself if you were in an NGO, that you could actually declare it in this. There's a smoothing of the process,
Yes.
that things were moving bureaucratically but efficiently too.
Yes,
Which
and
is-
one-stop shop, and I mean, yes,
Yeah.
we try to do many things in this regard. Yeah.
What you're well known for is seatbelt checkpoints as well, which were important, but it showed that the state was moving. Even when they were unpopular for traffic jams,
Yes,
and even
unpopular, but the message was we want to protect you. So
The-
it
the
was
simple-
not about
honestly,
fines.
the simple fact that there were traffic signals being erected and that there was some measure of traffic safety was so welcomed and so desperately needed.
You know that the rate of casualties dropped by 57% when we launched this big campaign for 57% for the as an example, instead of 60 casualties, we had 38. Okay, for the same period of time across 3 years comparison. What does it mean? It means that 38 families are not crying.
Exactly.
So for me, it was something. You know, yes, the internal security forces were doing a lot in terms of fighting terrorism, and they really did very good. And even contre-espionnage. But at the same time, you could do what would protect people, citizens, from smaller things. If you have, in numbers, it was huge.
So these are successes that need to be acknowledged. And the way you said it is I think
But again, doing my job.
you're doing your job. Would it be fair to also add to that story that is the maneuvering space you were given as an independent, meaning it's not a hidden issue, it's upfront, it affects everyone in this country in different ways. Political crimes were the norm in those years, and assassinations happened before you came.
And after.
And the culprits were not chased down.
Before and after, yeah, it's the judiciary. I'm not
Right.
trying to say it's not my job. Yes, it's my job. It's everybody's job. But you know, I had the chance that throughout the 3 years that I spent in Sanaya, we had a very peaceful, so to speak,
I think what comes to my mind, and this is from my side.
and growth was like 8%.
Yeah.
And so
and things were looking better for Lebanon in general.
Yes.
You know, I think it's in those years things that you can't imagine today. The New York Times was labeling this country as their #1 tourism destination. There was money coming back to the country.
traffic jams were due to the fact that we had many tourists and Lebanese
Right.
people coming back. Okay.
But this is what comes to my mind. Anyone in your shoes is serving as Minister of Interior, and there have been other ministers of Interior before and others after. And none of those political assassinations, none of them are taken seriously. The only ones that are even remotely looked into for a brief period of time are the ones that happened 2004 to
But why?
2005.
Let us dig further.
Special Tribunal
Why?
for Lebanon.
Why?
That it wasn't in Lebanon's court. These are investigations done by the UN.
Okay.
But I guess what
This
I'm
is
asking...
another story.
No,
Let's talk
can
about
I-
political
Sure.
assassinations.
But can I just finish the thread and then
Please.
I'll let you speak? I'm
Please.
sorry, because I want to hone in
Please
on
go
one
ahead.
thing. I know it is absolutely unfair to accuse a Minister of Interior for not doing more when they're not given more authority. I think it is fair to accuse anyone in those shoes that if they want to survive in that capacity, they have to work within that limited terrain they're offered. My understanding.
Okay, you're being kind. Thank you.
No, but my understanding.
I would say every one of us is supposed to do the maximum he or she can in order to give answers to people.
Were you able to do anything in that world?
The main issue that really made me very sad was Joseph Sadir when he was kidnapped, and I could give his family zero serious answer.
Yeah.
The services, I mean the Malumet, the army, I mean, everybody tried. I never got any answer. So the Minister of Interior is not the one who does the investigation, but those who are doing the investigation were unable to give serious answers, and up till now we're unable to give, or the government or the country is unable to give Joseph Sadir's family proper answers after many years, and this is frustrating for them and for me, you know. But again, how is the judiciary performing? We have issues. We know for a fact how today Tariq Bitar is trying to do his best, and we know how difficult it is for him and for the families, for the victims, to get answers. In a big thing such as the Beirut port blast, the security army, ISF, and general security, there are really, because I know, I witnessed this. We have excellent people there, excellent people, but and many really were able to succeed in fighting crimes and in finding answers.
Let me reframe.
But when it comes to political assassination, it's something else.
But let me reframe it, and then you say as much as you'd like. And I'm sorry to go further on this, but before you enter office, a very talented intelligence officer, Wissam Aid, is killed.
Yes.
Months before you enter.
Yes.
I think his anniversary was just last week. So after you leave, Brigadier General Wissam al-Hassan is killed. So no ministry is spared when they're doing their ultimate duty.
That's what I was trying to say.
Right. But that's what I meant in terms of when you step onto terrain that you're not afforded in this country, you get eliminated. And I wonder if in that conversation, basic reform, I mean, this is state functionality. This is the essence of the state. I can't imagine in 2022, and I know we're fast forwarding a bit, with those questions left unanswered, that things would be any different. Whether it's civil society crowd that enters, whether it's a brand new crowd altogether. That there's this proxy.
I agree, because you're talking here macro.
Yeah.
Okay? Macro is about the system again. So even
No, not the system, Ziyad, not the system. I'm talking about
I do blame it on the system as well.
Okay, then we can
It's partially the system.
I will keep this in with your permission.
Politics as well, and
I'll keep this in with your permission. If you don't want to, I can remove it. It's up to you. I don't think the system killed Wissam Aid or Wissam al-Hassan.
not the system, but the system made it possible for everybody to step in and make things difficult for Lebanese people. That's how I see it when I say macro. Because you don't have a strong central government, a strong army. We have, the army in Lebanon is widely positively perceived. But do we really have a government that can pretend that everything is under control? Definitely not. Why? I'm back to the source. The source is the system.
I've had this kind of conversation with yourself briefly, and with others that we both had dinner with not too long ago. It was at Mary Claude Nejam's home, and there's an entourage there that I think it was a fun exchange back and forth, and we kind of went there a bit, whether it's the system or whether it's something that is strangling the system. whether it's an old system that needs to be reformed or a system that was born in error. And I think over time,
Same result.
one matters more, and that the reformists, I think, and I would put you in this camp, the reformists, it's not fair to assume reformists have the tools necessary to challenge a giant regional proxy machine. I think that's part of the reality too. So I see it as somebody doing their job, as you said, or anyone in your shoes, anyone like you, doing their job, but for it to really move on from this nightmare, it's not in Lebanon's court. And I don't know if that's a shared opinion.
No, I agree.
Okay, so let's jump a bit ahead of time, and you've said so much about 2018 that I'm not going to hammer you on this. I think I agree in the sense that it's a reality. You have to join lists in this country. If you want to run for parliament, it's very difficult to not tag on to lists. And I know that you've said it in different outlets, that you've had your lessons learned. You don't regret any decisions you took.
And I don't blame it on others.
And you don't blame it
Most
on others.
importantly.
But you said something very, very important.
I take responsibility. So
Exactly. And
if I'm mistaken, I paid the price. So,
but I've heard you say something else which kind of, like a light bulb above my brain, what's left of it. You said that in a way, you're lucky that you were not exposed, that you were not in parliament or in power in any form on October 17, 2019. Yes. Now, you've used the word independent many times.
Yes.
And I think that is a fair and accurate description. Does that allow more breathing space among other figures that served in different governments? Meaning, the slogans that we heard on October 17, 2019, and the weeks thereafter, and the more cautious, more purists in October 17 today. Is there perhaps something that's misread in the story, that كلٌ يعني كلٌ should not include someone like you, or should not include others that have served but tried?
I don't mind.
You don't mind? Okay.
No, because كلٌ يعني كلٌ, I have nothing to hide. Be it, yes, كلٌ يعني كلٌ, meaning we should all be under accountability. We should all be accountable. I don't think that what is meant by كلٌ يعني كلٌ is whatever you did, you're presumed guilty. No, I don't think that's the original meaning. So I say yes, but at the same time, if someone served his country without being corrupt, I mean, this is something better for the revolution. Why? Because you know the guy, you know that he was subject to corruption, maybe, and he was not corrupt. So it should be okay. So, but anyway, I understand people in the streets. They were really frustrated and very angry, and I didn't feel concerned by كلٌ يعني كلٌ in a way, in a negative way, and I said it publicly. I said two things that I wish to repeat. One is okay, كلٌ يعني كلٌ, fair. Let's go to courts where need be.
I remember,
And two, I said I will not go to the street because this is not ours as politicians, because we had TV stations, interviews. No, it's the space is for the people. It's not for politicians, even if someone like me feels that he's getting back to civil society from where he came. But having served my country for 3 years as Minister of Interior, I said, well, the space is for the people, not for us. So I was very keen on not going to the street out of respect for the people. And because some of them, again, I understand them. Some of them would say, well, you were part of it, and moreover, you were in alliance with the Sulta lists in 2018. Okay, this is a fact. The alliance is a fact. It doesn't mean that I lost my independence. and I didn't make it to their blocks, parliamentary blocks. That's why I don't feel concerned by this. But at the same time, I understand that people do not like all those who were at some point in time part of the picture. So maybe we have to do what we call in French traverser du désert. Maybe I should step back and respect people's voices and choices. That's why I'm not anticipating your questions, but maybe 2022 should be. I should maybe not run for parliament in 2022.
You've offered a very nice segue into the coming months, and I'm going to assume that your reasons for running along, if we can narrow it down a bit, not necessarily the Sulta list, but it was one particular party, Tayar Watan al-Hur, that may have proven two things. One, it perhaps moved you from what was deemed more independent under Michel Sleiman's cabinet and Minister of Interior, or even those years before and the years after, to, I don't know if flirting is the right word, but let's say dancing to the tune of a side that you had stepped away from a bit and you were moving forward with. You're not March 8. You're not a Tayar Watan al-Hur member. You were on a list in Jbel Kisrwain.
Same as Michel Mawad.
Same as Michel Mawad.
100%.
Exactly. So but they are also finding their way to independence on their terms again. Independent identity.
Yes.
Right. Jump ahead. 2022. I know these are whispers. I know these are rumors. And I know that you've said no to a degree and you've been careful maybe with the way you want to even talk about it. If you were to join the wait list this round, let's say you did run for parliament and you joined that list, would that to you be out of necessity like 2018, or is that even off the table completely? Because my understanding of this rumor mill is these are more words spoken on your behalf than your own words, but they've been shared enough times for me to at least want to know from your side. Would it be the same reasoning that you did in 2018, that if you were to do it now, it's because that's the way the state functions, that's the system?
With
that's
all due respect to all political parties, they have their constituencies, they have their people, and I respect their people. I respect their choices. I'm not partisan. I'm not part of any political group, traditional political group. New political groups, excuse me, I'm close to some of them or most of them, and we shared experience, we shared too many things. Does it necessarily mean that I should run for parliament in 2022? Is it really a destiny that everyone who served his country for a couple of years as minister should definitely run for parliament? When I ran in 2018, it was because it has its own, context, but at the same time, it was because I thought, wrongly maybe, that I need a popular legitimacy, which I partially got. I'm happy with the preferential votes that I got on my own, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to run for parliament in 2022. Now, to be very honest, this is 2022 is important, but it's not a goal in itself. So it's not the end of politics, nor not the end of it's important, yes.
Yeah.
But the law being what it is, and the alliances being what they are, and to be very honest, the alternative groups being divided to a large extent makes me think twice before taking the step.
Is it even
plus, if I'm going to now we're talking in end of January.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe if something really reformist comes up, and if we really feel that we're heading towards something that could reflect a group of people who share principles and ideals, yes, maybe why not? But this would be my only, I wouldn't say condition, but this is how I would run or not for parliament. And I would prefer to be a strong voter rather than any candidate.
But is there even an opportunity for you, let's say you were to run and the reformists in October 17 were divided until the elections? Is there even the opportunity for anyone in your shoes, somebody who's trying to run as an independent, to run as an independent without tagging along with a list?
No way.
So is that an inevitability?
That's why I said the law being what it is.
Right. But
proportional representation with blocked lists.
And I don't want to sound like a
and
news...
the threshold. I wouldn't like to go technical here, but if you ask me, I can, for hours, I can explain why this law...
I mean, you're the expert on these things.
It's bad for independent.
Yeah.
And that's why I believe that newcomers or alternative groups should really be in a very solid alliance in order to make the breakthrough. And that's why you see that many of them are trying to have some alliances with existing political figures. So
I guess
I'm not discussing this, but I'm saying that you cannot. I mean, I don't like the 1960 law. Okay, simple majority, but honestly, with the 1960 law, I would have made it easily to the parliament because
on your own,
on my own, as an independent and without any alliance. You see, I'm not. It's not me who's saying this,
right? But I guess
statistics, but we're not there anymore.
Yeah.
We're under a proportional representation law. I am favorable for the proportional representation, but the one single preferential vote is bad. The threshold is very high. In 2018, it was 20%. This is way beyond the international standards.
Without trying to make it sound like a news bite or a scoop or whatever, just really in terms of the frank reality, if you're not to run with, I'm assuming you will not run with a Tayyar list once more, does that just make it inevitable that it's either going to be...
I will not run with any political party, existing political party, traditional political party.
Right.
With all due respect. I'm not a judge. I mean...
even in terms of joining a list that you would not... Okay.
No, so for many reasons. Right. Political and technical. Because, when you run with political parties... their preferential votes would go to their candidates. So you bring to the list and you get nothing in return.
Is that one of those lessons learned for
Unless you have enough money.
Is that for you a lesson, one of those lessons from 2018 that you don't want to find yourself in those shoes?
Absolutely.
So it's not
unless it is a really political campaign with alternative groups where I can do, a plus when I could have an added value. If not, I prefer to be a voter.
Yeah.
A voter vocal and able to assist and help rather than being a candidate with nothing much in his hands.
I appreciate you even letting me go down this road anyway, because it's those whispers that make me more curious if it's more to do with the fait accompli that someone has to join a list, and it doesn't even... It opens the door to independents joining lists they may not even want to join to begin with, and that maybe in those conversations
I think that independent people who are thinking of it should look at what happened with me and decide accordingly.
That's well said. I'll wrap it up, Ziyad, with something that's a little more academic, not so emotional or romantic. Your whole, there's so much literature on decentralization, and I think that word is often misunderstood. Yes. I think people link it to other words, and maybe they don't fully appreciate what it's supposed to do. I've even heard people linking it to federalism and almost like a cantonization that I don't think is there. It's about administration and about better administration. So from your entrance into this world until today, is decentralization to you still a pillar that hasn't been erected, that we're not there, but we need to get there? Has your prioritization on this issue shifted at all? Or is it still something that you want to confront?
I still believe, and more, that decentralization is a much needed reform. First, because it's about democratic participation, a wider participation. Second, because it will lead to better services in the whole country instead of relying only on the central government. And third, it will make Lebanon more united, which is totally opposed to what many would think. Why? Because, as you mentioned, some would mix between federalism and decentralization, knowing that federalism is not a curse.
Yeah.
Federalism is a way of...
It's a form of governance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Within a one country, one state.
Sure.
So, okay, I know in Lebanon how it works. I know how people would use words in order to, to lead, to go beyond the word to something different. But for me, decentralization since Taif Accord, since 1989, is not or should not be controversial anymore, because it was an agreement that decentralization is good for everybody. And decentralization is, as Khalid Qabbani, who's someone I trust a lot and I respect a lot, he was one of those who participated in Taif, and he wrote it and he said it publicly. Since Taif, decentralization is the only way of dealing with diversity within one unified country.
Did he have anything?
So no partition. He didn't mention federalism, maybe directly, or maybe he did. But yes, federalism. If Lebanese people are in agreement with the federalism, okay, why not? But they agreed on decentralization. So my stand here is the following: I totally understand that people would call for or some people would call for federalism. They shouldn't be blamed. It's their right, their constitutional right. But at the same time, today decentralization is unanimously accepted, or has been accepted since Taif. We have a draft law. The parliament spent, the commission spent 63 meeting discussing it, so it's ready to go.
Yeah.
That's why I believe that we need to once and for all to have decentralization, but with enough resources. Because the last discussion that we witnessed lately, La Merkaziyya Maliyya, financial decentralization. I mean, if you have the best decentralization ever without financial resources, it's useless. So, baleha.
Can I take it in a slightly different direction? And this is decentralization being the bigger word. And you mentioned Taif, and that it's just something that hasn't happened. It's long overdue. Is decentralization and things in Taif, in addition to decentralization, like the Senate,
yes,
things like that, is that goal really to mitigate sectarianism, but allow for power sharing to modernize? Is that the wider goal here? And
it should be, yes.
Right.
But 32 years after Taif, or 33 years, we should at least have an evaluation. We should at least see what went well, what did not work. The Senate and decentralization were not even applied.
Right.
Once it's implemented, we'll see. And most importantly, one should see how both would be implemented. Now, being sectarian, the Senate being sectarian, it was their own way of seeing things.
Yeah.
Maybe I I have another way of seeing it, but it's a transition. I read it as as a constitutional transition. And even this transition is not allowed, has not been allowed for 32 years.
So to wrap it up with the last question, and maybe the most critical one on this journey, you've been in this world for 32 years. For the better part of 3 decades, this is the world you live in. Does the onus go on Lebanese trying to figure things out? Or does it go to the geopolitical nightmare that persisted after the civil war? Perverted politics under Syrian rule, proxy-like status quo that has led to dire situation, including permanent paralysis, violence, port blast that does not happen accidentally. Ammonium nitrate doesn't just simply appear in a port and 2,700 tons of it. That this is beyond reformists. And there are so many reformists in this country that are frustrated and angry. And you said it really well earlier. You have to be frustrated and angry, whether you're in power or in civil society. But that the burden is not on someone like you. It's on things that are just too difficult for reformists to tackle.
The burden is on our kids. We're badly managing the situation to the extent that we'll end up offering our kids, meaning the new generation, more problems to deal with. But to answer your question, it's all of the above. It's a combination of all of this. Now, in Arabic we say نحن مش هينين, meaning, yes, I do blame myself to start with, and all my fellow citizens, that maybe we should have made different choices. Maybe we should at some point in time admit that we had our share of mistakes, bad choices, bad management. But yes, at the same time, if you want to put some, to make it lighter, you would say, well, we're in this part of the world where everything is difficult. One scholar once wrote something about the stability in Lebanon between 1920 and 2000, and she discovered that the average stability is always less than 4 years. Take, for instance, independence, 1943. 4 or 5 years later, you have the Nakba in Palestine. So a very young state, in the Lebanese state. 5 years later, after independence, the Nakba, the huge Nakba. 2-3 years later, Bashar al-Khoury stepped down. A couple of years later, the 1958 revolution, 1961, the coup d'etat of the 1967 Naksa after the Nakba, and then the war, 1969 Cairo Agreement. So we really didn't have the chance to find a couple of years of stability in order to assess the. Anyway, I think that yes, we had this geopolitical problems, mainly the Palestinian cause, and Lebanon paid a very high price on this. But at the same time, مش هينين, we mismanaged, and we could have made better choices. Now it's not too late. And to end with a positive note, I think that the crisis of starting 2019, the banks, all what came afterward is an opportunity, because we have to change the model that we were living according to, and we should really think that Lebanon can stand again, but provided we have a solid basis to. So far, it's not the case. That's why I'm saying 2022 spring, May 2022 elections are important, but they are not the only important thing that we should do. So
Yeah.
yes, we need a change. We need to make a breakthrough. It won't be maybe huge, but whatever it is, it's good. Whatever the numbers are, it's good. It's a good start. But we should do a lot in parallel. We should have a good government that can really take things in hand and strongly perform. We need to see what to be done with the IMF in a way that the Lebanese way of doing business wouldn't harm the process and vice versa. A lot has to be done. Decentralization maybe could be one of those. And let us think the system or rethink the system in a constitutional way. Because my fear is if we end up unable to have elections, unable to have parliamentary elections, unable to elect a president, and if the parliament finds itself unable to extend its own term, which any extension would be unconstitutional, I agree. But let us imagine no elections, no extension, so vacuum, and then what? What we call مؤتمر تأسيسي, a new. We'll see. But even that, we should be prepared. We Lebanese should be prepared to take the best out of this, out of the problems that we're facing. Actually,
I appreciate several things you just outlined. One, that the task needs to be done regardless. Reform is essential with or without geopolitics interfering. And I'm glad that you've also outlined, in a way, the frustration someone like you faces now, we're all facing, and that we're living through a very crippling political era. On top of that, and I think this is maybe a point of disagreement, perhaps, but it's fine. I don't think the goal at hand is feasible the way we want it to appear long term, so long as issues like geopolitics and the collateral that it has on Lebanon, whether it's in the 1970s, which tore this country apart, whether it's in the 1990s and 2000s, which eroded politics severely, or where we are now. I mean, you walk around Beirut in 2022 and some neighborhoods look like it's a war zone, as opposed to 32 years after the Civil War. I can't imagine the noble goal happening in our lifetime, as long as those issues they're out of our reach. And I don't know what we can do more than what's been done in terms of trying to find a way out locally. You mentioned it very quickly, but it's important. The Baabda Declaration was, I think, the closest we could get to national consensus on neutrality. One group signs on to it, and then hours later is heavily involved across the border. And then reformists are still expected to do the long job ahead. To me, there's a dichotomy there.
yeah, you're right. But we have no other choice but do both in parallel.
Yeah.
Because yes, there might be some intersections, but I would say let's do our job, our internal job, our homework, and then we'll see if there's any intersection that we can take benefit out of it.
Yeah.
Then be it. I know, it's weird. I don't have any information whatsoever, any reliable information on this, but I feel that somehow we'll be able to have this intersection of in the best interest of Lebanon, mind you. So let's do our homework, because if we're not ready and it happens, well, we won't be ready. That's why I believe that we have a lot to do internally. We have to be to insist on high levels of transparency, on higher levels of good performance, of accountability, for the future, not only for the past. For me, the past, yes, we have to deal with it, definitely. But we have also to say, well, we're starting now a new era where things should not work. Business should not be as usual. When you take, for instance, the procurement law, the new procurement law, for me, it's a good thing. It's a good start, because we're doing our homework.
Yeah.
So if the international community if the friends of Lebanon wish to help and assist, we'll meet them halfway. My concern is that somewhere we won't be able to meet halfway. So yes, let's get ready, let's get prepared for all the reforms for our own sake, not for the sake of the IMF or the World Bank, or for our own sake, for our children. And then we'll see. Geopolitics, yes, it's there since day one. Okay, we'll see how to navigate, how to maneuver accordingly. But I cannot say today in January 2022, I cannot tell really what would be the outcome of Vienna talks, for instance. But does it mean that we stop everything in the wait?
Yeah. Well, those two words, navigate and maneuver, I think for better or worse, every player in this country is doing that. Some are doing it for the right reasons. Some are doing it for Lebanon's sake. Others are doing it for maybe more calculated, more regional interest. But I think I agree with the long-term sentiment that you need to have the tools available, apply them as much as you can when things improve down the road.
When the time comes, yes.
And if it's not our generation, it's the kids' generation, but it'll happen eventually.
Some reforms, if they were started 10 years ago, take electricity, for instance.
Yeah.
What a mess.
Thank you for letting me go down memory lane a bit with you. You're a needed voice in many ways, but most importantly, it's the perspective you have as an independent figure and as somebody who's done a lot of work in civil society and somebody who did navigate and maneuver a very important ministry in this country for 3 years. And you've retained a lot of the popularity that you had in those years. I think very few people I speak with, when I mentioned that I was doing this episode, they were all very eager to hear your words. Your words are still listened to and listened to carefully.
I hope they will not get bored after listening.
I doubt it. And it's because, if anything, I'll have to edit myself out. And no, nobody's going to...
No, don't. Because, the conversation is... what I like in this, in what we did, is the conversation. Because it's not... I mean, your questions are also sometimes about statements.
No, but
or you reflect what people would have in mind. So thank you for...
And thank you for letting me apply a bit of electricity and friction, because I think it brought out a good hour and a half or so between us. Thank you, Ziyad.
Thank you. Thank you, Ronnie.